My name's Ron Potts. I'm from Federal Way Police Department. I've got about 25 years in law enforcement and about 20 years in forensics documentation. I've been using a total station for quite a while, and we'll get into some of that, but I'll turn it over to Curtis to introduce himself.
I'm his trusty sidekick, Curtis Tucker, and I've been only a few years, but I've learned from he knows everything, so I get it from him. So whatever I'm wrong in, we'll just blame it on him. Yeah, we learned this new thing together. He had the total station experience, and we came in with the 21st century with this stuff here, and so here we are. So I hope you enjoy what we're going to have to tell you.
So we'll banter back and forth quite a bit, and we work together as a team. But if you have any questions, like I said, if you leave it to the end, we'll be happy to answer any of your questions. What we're going over is a lot of stuff that Bobby was talking about that we found out with the new system is it is very quick. It is very easy. But getting there is where we had our problems, and we had some issues. And so we're going to go over some of those. We look at it just like Bobby does. It's very new age for forensic documentation. We think it's great. I've been using Total Station for quite some time, and in doing so, gone through the same pitfalls as everybody else did. Time on scene, station moves, different things like that. I do want to thank PPI and CAD Zone, because one of the things that we're finding out is the more people get used to knowing what's available and how it's used, the user groups that are going to develop out there. The problems we have, if we can prevent you from falling into the same pitfalls that we did, will help you guys. You guys learn something new, and by everybody using it, makes it a lot easier for everybody to find different things that do work and don't work. And what we're finding out is nationwide, as new as it is, and as much as people are wanting to use it, there's so many more people that are going to start using it. Just like Bobby said, it's getting price-wise to a point that everybody can afford it. Again, it's whether you want to or not. We're not paid by the vendors. It sounds like a sales pitch. One of the things we're here talking about is our pitfalls, the problems we had. Pros, cons, good for the equipment, good for the software. And this is from a user's point of view. We have no endorsements here. We're not here to sell you any products. So if you see anything that pops up on the screen, that's not from us. No, in reality, we're not. We're not paid by the vendors. We're here to give you our real life aspects of what's going on. One of the things is that we had to do is go through a lot of problems and some successes. A lot more successes than problems, but we're here to discuss both of them. How many people remember some of the first total stations? D50 with an HP48. We ended up getting this almost 20 years ago, started using that. Great system at the time, and we thought that this was the way to go. Cost about $9,000. We sat there and we used it for about 4 years. Cumbersome. We had averaged about 200 to 300 points, which was on a good day. We upgraded to a semi-robotic system about 12 years ago. Semi-robotic was great. Onboard data collection, we could see what we were looking at. But the cost was $35,000. At that time, it was quite a bit of a jump from $9,000 to $35,000. So all of a sudden, we're coming to a point where we need to figure out what we're going to do. We went with the Faro. We took Bobby's idea of, hey, mark your equipment, because if you don't, it is very easy to get knocked down. And that's where we use these user groups to learn something new each time, each and every time we see somebody doing something, we pick it up and we start using it in our own practices. It's great. But this is what we had, is we're looking back through time and the history. The D50, we got 100 to 200. Station moves, we did not want to do station moves with older equipment. The Trimble, 300 to 500 points, and we did 5 to 6 station moves because they were quite a bit easier. We're going to get into the Faro and the points in the station moves that we did at a later point in this presentation. But when we're sitting here looking at it, this is some of the history that I kept going over with our command staff to sit there and get them used to. This is what we started out with. This is our capabilities that are at the time. This is where we moved to. Now our equipment after 12 years was running on its last legs. Great equipment, but it wasn't being supported anymore by Trimble. Our concern was getting called out and not working. So that leads us to about 2 years ago. We started doing research on what was going to be the best transition for us to go into, not taking price into consideration at the time. Not to say we had an open budget, but when we sat down and started looking at what was going to be best for what we were doing, at the decision it was made that we were going to go down with a scanner. Weren't sure which one at the time, but we started focusing on the Faro. We liked it, we liked the information. Biggest thing for us is we're a mediocre-sized department in the state of Washington. We got about 120 officers, so we're not real big. We're self-contained. All the stuff that we do is individualized. We sit down, I've got multiple tasks. I'm currently assigned to patrol, but I've got a collateral assignment for doing scene documentation. I've been assigned to traffic investigations. I'm a reconstructionist, did that for 10 years. During that time, over 20 years of scene documentation with total stations. A lot of good information, but we've moved forward. So we looked at the Focus Scanner as a replacement unit for our department. We got a lot of support. But first, what I found as in all departments is we had to identify some funding sources. Bobby talked about it a little bit, but with our presentations, it works a lot better if we go in looking or having some funding sources identified. For our department, it was great. We had grants. We looked at drug seizure funds, asset forfeiture from our vehicle theft task force, photo enforcement revenue, and replacement reserves for our old unit. Now, these are things that we tapped into, and these are just a small part of what we could do or what we were looking at. Each department has different revenue sources. But it's like our asset forfeiture was over $100,000. Our drug seizure was over $100,000. But guess what had the most amount of money? Photo enforcement. We had over $1 million in that basket that we were able to tap into at least $300,000. So having those resources in mind, it made it a little bit easier when we went in to ask for a new piece of equipment.
On the like drug seizure funds and certain grants or certain funds you're trying to get money from, understand that you have to somehow tie it into that, right? Well, how many crime scenes do we have that are drug related? Well, there's your tie-in to get drug money. There's all kinds of ways to get it to work. Photo enforcement, our biggest thing up there is that nobody wants photo enforcement. Because it's the man taking us down. That's what the people are saying. Well, if we could take the money and do something good with it, it's a lot easier for us to argue it. You guys are just taking the money and doing something stupid with it. No, we're making things better, and that's kind of how this played out.
So we sat down and we looked at a quote for the scanner. We talked to PPI. At the time, they were a sole source for the state of Washington, so it was easier for us to go straight for the scanner and the PPI group. They worked with us. Our initial quote was about $68,000. Everybody looks at that and goes, man, that's a hurdle that's hard to get over. But if you looked at our previous total station, which was semi-robotic, it was $35,000. So it wasn't that big of a step in getting us to move into the new century or the new age. And the way we sold it was a couple different ways. We talked about it being faster, collected more data, fewer operators in the scene, was lighter, and now the big thing is we could use it on the indoor scenes. With your total stations, how many times have you been able to go into an apartment complex or an apartment by itself, set up your total station and use it? Totally impractical, it doesn't work. With the scanner, you can sit there and you can go inside apartments, you can scan fairly quick you can get done. And it's like Bobby says, you're collecting so much data and it's instantaneous. But that was one of our downfalls too. As we sold it as being quick, command staff remembers two things: how much money it's going to cost and how much time are we going to save at the scene. Well, that came to bite us in the backside at a couple other areas, because when we're sitting there taking a little bit longer, that's the first question is, how come it's not as fast as you guys said it was? Well, we'll show you some of the reasons why in a couple minutes. We were successful. We got the money. It was approved. We went through PPI. We've had the scanner since January of last year too. We got the training in late February, early March, and we were ready to go. But these are some of the issues we came up. We played up the fast scene time. At the time, the only point cloud software was the ARIS 360. Sorry, Derek. Didn't mean to throw them in, but at the time, that's what we had to go with, because we had to do a presentation for our council on what software was available, what would work at the time. We didn't know at the time the Faro Scene software had a yearly subscription of $1,000 just to continue to use it. Every time you buy it, you got to update it. Well, these are issues that we found, and we had to continually go back and say, hey, these are some of the issues that were financially going to hit you guys at a later date. The computer, we looked at the requirements, and a lot of software manufacturers play down the requirements of what is actually needed and what works. And this is some of the issues we came up with. When it came to the computer, we had to request an upgrade for on four separate occasions at a financial hit on each one of those occasions to get a computer that would work with both the equipment and the software. This is some of the things that we had to upgrade. First of all, the computers you guys are currently using may work some of the software and may not work all the software. We're running 3 different software programs right now, and for Derek's software, it does work. But what we found for the Scene software, it didn't. For ARIS 360, it didn't. We had some issues there. So after we upgraded the computers, then we turned around and we found out that we needed a dedicated video card for each one of our computers. That was an additional cost that we had to go back to. We had to ask for more funding for that. We found out that in Scene software, that the 8 gigs of RAM that we originally had on it did work. But as soon as we converted to 32 gigs, that Scene software worked 3 times better. It was faster. The registration was faster. We worked with the software faster. It prepared our initial scans and diagrams for stuff that would go into any other software program a lot faster, more dependable.
For those that sit back, oh well, I can set some time and do this. It doesn't have to be like that. But when you had detectives looking, going, wow, this is a great new scanner. Let's take a look at how that works. Hey, give them about 10 minutes and it'll do its thing. It is a big difference. So those that, if you're going in, get the equipment first, upgrade it, all the RAM is cheaper than buying it piece by piece. But make sure you do that. You've got to do it. You can't go in with a basic state bid computer. Go back and look and see what you got, but you're not going to get it with a state bid computer and make it work as well as it should.
And for us, what we included was we had 2 workstations. So we had to upgrade both workstations, which was at quite of an expense. Our department, since it works through the state, we had to go state bid on it. So we had to pay premium dollars for each one of our upgrades. So that's another thing to take into consideration. The computers that we ordered and initially came with a 500 gig hard drive. That doesn't sound like a big deal to anybody. All of a sudden, our first scene took 80 gigs of that 500 gig. And we're sitting there going, holy mackerel, we got to go back and ask for more storage. So then we set up and we started getting with our IT department, and we set up with 2 terabyte hard drives to start storing our data. Because we didn't know at the time that data collection was that massive, that there was so much there that we turned around and started going, holy mackerel. We were saving it on our server, and all of a sudden I'm getting a call from my IT department that's going, you guys just maxed out your dedicated drive for the whole police department. What are you guys doing? And all of a sudden I'm getting these nasty grams. They thought, I kept saying it's detectives, it's the photographs that they're storing. Then all of a sudden I'm looking at our file size and I go, holy mackerel. So be aware of that. We weren't. And all of a sudden we have everybody and their brother coming breathing down our necks about what's going on. Work with your IT department to set up redundant storage. I've already lost a whole bunch of files because while we're making our change, because we didn't set up the computer initially right the first time, is I had 80 gigs of data with a diagram that was a working diagram gone. That makes for a bad day. Very upset. Especially when I got detectives saying, hey, we got an inquest coming up in a month or two, and are you prepared? Well, I was, but not now. So our first call out, we're gonna go into actual uses and stuff that we did on where we're going. Our first call out, evening hours, get a call, hey, you got your new scanner, are you ready to go play? 10 o'clock at night, great, what do we got? 1 deceased suspect, 4 homicide victims, 8 officer-involved shootings, a large parking lot, 2 apartments on multiple floors, evidence everywhere. This scene took us 35 scans, and I like Bobby, and the 1 scan would be great if we could have done it. But we had so much evidence, we're going in between cars in the carport, we're working around through where the suspect was. We have 4 bodies on scene and 1 that had just been removed. 35 scans and 1 billion points later. The good part about it is, just like Bobby says, guess what? We didn't miss anything. Kind of stressed, kind of sweating, because we're sitting there thinking, should we call out the total station? And I'm sitting here thinking, I'm looking at the scene, I'm going, hey, this is a pretty big scene. We haven't used the equipment. We haven't even tested the equipment. We just got the training on the equipment. My partner sits there and goes, yeah, got it done. And I look at him and go, what are you talking about? Because we were talking about using a hybrid system of combining 2 total station and the scanners to do the same thing. But when my partner said yes, we hit the road running, we went through it, we did it. After we registered all 35 scans, we were within 1 centimeter on all scans of error of accuracy. So we thought we did pretty good. It was a great time. A lot of information, we did a lot. We just get that one done. And one of the things that we didn't cover on the last one is the time that we were on scene. I'll let Curtis talk about that.
So understand that because not everybody knows what we're doing, this is the first time this thing had been used in that area, in that county, has that scanner been used out on scene. So nobody knew what we were doing. We had multiple agencies helping us out because a whole squad of our officers were involved in the shooting. So it was a big deal. And so we go out there and we start doing our thing, and no one knows what we're doing. They're like, let's do the walkthrough so you can show us what you want to get, and then we'll get out of your hair. They're like, well, what are you doing? You stay, we'll tell you when you want to come in there. Well, had they let us go through the walkthrough, we could have started scanning right then. Instead, we couldn't even go in the scene. We had to wait until they were done figuring out what they wanted to do. And so it took time. And then the other thing was that we were running 9-minute scans. So you can do the math. It takes a long time to run that, and as we're moving down. People didn't know what we were doing. People were walking in front of the thing because they thought it was a total station. They were looking for the guy at the pole. And we're like, no, there's no pole. We're doing everything. So it takes a long time. So he got called at, 9 o'clock?
Yep.
And we were there till 7 or 8 the next morning. I got it there, like 10:30. And the reason, not because of the scanner, was because we had to wait for everyone else to make a decision when we could start scanning. We could have been in and out really quickly, but they had to wait. And then we had to go around buildings because they wouldn't let us go through a front door to bring the scans together. We had to go around a building to make it work. So those are what a total station is. You got to go around things to connect the scans. Same thing here, you got to connect them somehow. So we had to go around the building, so that was 4 more scans for the way we were running it. And again, we didn't have a lot of knowledge. So this is the first thing, we had our training, and him and I were playing with a second 2-story house. We scanned it once just to play around and see how we were doing. And it's like, okay, let's go, let's do it. So it helps you. If you don't know everything, it'll take up the slack for you. So it does take a lot of time. So 14 hours that we figured total time that we were out there. But it's not because of us, it was because everybody else not knowing what we were doing.
So also during that time, we have the command staff, just like Bobby's saying, they're sitting there, when are you going to be done? You said this is faster. How come it's taking longer? So what I'll tell you is, if you're going to play up the speed, don't play it up too fast, and don't play it up too hard, because everybody thinks that when you say fast, you're going to be done, you're going to be in, and you're going to be out. Well, it depends on quite a few things. Our second call out was another officer involved shooting, documenting the suspect vehicle at final arrest. From the time we walked onto the scene to the time we walked off was 45 minutes and 5 scans later. And we had everything we needed, including the gun that was wedged in between the driver's seat and the center console in the vehicle from scan data. Easy, we were in, we were out. Put it this way, this one went so quick, everybody's going, where are you going? Or to go eat lunch. No, we left. Had the scene processed, we had it registered, we had it ready for preparation and viewing within an hour after the time that we left the scene. Great, lots of data. One of the things that you need to really sit down and realize is your desk time. With Total Station, it was total difference. A lot of time on the scene, less time at the computer. Now what we're finding out is less time on the scene, more time on your computer. Because you're looking at multiple softwares that you're using. You're using scene software that comes with Faro to register or pull all the scans together to make them visible. Because you're taking your scans, since there are multiple scans, and you're putting them together as if they're just one. Then taking that data and importing it into an aftermarket, either Derek software or some other software, whatever you're currently using, and then registering it and working it in the point cloud. And then for some people, that gets to be a little bit more difficult because you're sitting there, you're looking. My first scene, that as I'm sitting there going through and doing the diagramming, I'm clicking on points and I'm sitting here going, hey, this looks great. As soon as I click it into 3D, I've got lines running through trees, I've got lines running through bushes. I'm sitting here going, holy mackerel. Moving back to a 3D mode to draw just made it so much easier. But if you're not used to that, the time that you're looking at or you're working on your computer does take a little bit longer. So be aware of that and be prepared for that. Since we're doing collateral assignments, I'm trying to work patrol and then come in on my off time, or when I get a little bit of break in my time of patrol to come and do the diagramming, which makes it a little bit more difficult. Our successes, we only captured if we found it. We assisted another outside agency on another homicide. We get called to the scene at 9 o'clock at night. It's an indoor single victim. She was stabbed, found by a call the police department for a welfare check. We get out there, we go through, we scan the whole scene for the detectives. Everything went smooth. We're sitting there, we met with the detectives, we got in, we started scanning immediately, we were out, we were done. I sit down and do the whole diagram, send it to the detectives. Detectives get it, look at it, go, hey, that's great. But you forgot 5 pieces of evidence. What do you mean I forgot 5 pieces of evidence? Well, we had 5 evidence markers that you did not document. So I pull the Faro out and I look at the scan, I go, holy mackerel, evidence markers were not there. So I was able to go back to the detectives and go, guess what? Evidence markers were not there. So that's why we didn't mark them. Got with the detectives, the good part about it is, guess what? Evidence markers removed, evidence was not removed. Still on scene, so guess what we had? We had scan data and photos to show that they were still in place that was totally comparative to what the detectives investigated. So we were able to go in and place the evidence points in there, just like the detectives needed for the prosecuting diagram. Great tool. Never been able to do that before, except for in photogrammetry. And we didn't want to get into photogrammetry in the comparison for major scenes. We do it for minor scenes. But here, it saved the detectives. Great tool. Now you sit here and you look at some of the detail. Photo, point cloud. If somebody could, that's the actual point cloud. That's the data that you actually see. So if you can see it, you can identify it, you can draw it. And this was one of the biggest selling points that we were able to give to other agencies, our command staff, is look, this is what you get. It's about as true to life as possible. And if that's not dynamic, when you go to court and somebody wants to question what's going on, you go, that's it. And this point cloud has been reduced almost, I would hate, about 12 times. So there's about 12-to-1 ratio of reduction in there. If we kept it to its true nature and look at it in the Faro software, it's even more complete than that. But this is great to work with, gives us a lot of information. We can document it, we can go back to the point cloud at any time. It's there. Now we'll talk about point as the comparison we made it earlier. The D50, we did 100 to 200 points in about 3 to 5 hours. Trimble, 300 to 500 in 3 to 5 hours. We could do our station moves. Faro, we're averaging 1 million points per scene. And like I said, in our first one, we did 36 station moves, all within a 6-hour period. We would never thought about that with a total station. We would never done 36 total station moves. Excellent tool, easy to use, and just like Bobby says, it's a single push of the button. Couldn't be any easier than that. Just about anybody could do it, even my chief.
Okay, so we learn about from our mistakes. A lot of this, let me make sure you get the right one here. So a lot of this has got to do with buy-in and educating everyone else, because if you're the one that has the knowledge, when you go out to a scene, everybody's going to go, how does that work? How does that work? Can I see this? They're looking inside the scanner thing and like, dude, it's running. And they're like, oh, sorry about that. And they're watching you do the dance around it, you know, as you go around as it's moving. They're like, what are you doing? Well, I'm trying to stay out of the way. So unless you educate everybody, you're going to have this problem of ghosts. And you don't want ghosts in a crime scene. Especially when you talk about the point cloud and it just gets in the way. Let's see, going on here. Okay, so when you get your machine, you're going to get some professional training. You have to have it. Everybody that runs that machine needs to have the training. Don't short it. Don't try to get around it. You got to have the training, because if you don't, when it goes to court, and that guy that only got the Bob told me to do it this way, and the other guy goes, Fred told me to do it, and Bob told him how to do it. When you get that guy on the stand, he's going to make statements that's going to screw all of us with this machine, because his case law gets created. So take the training. Don't short it. You get it with the scanner. You get trained with the scanner. Drawing software, whatever you use should have a point cloud to it. Okay, if you don't have point cloud, then you're kind of wasting your time with the scanner. Okay, and a lot of it is updating. CADZone is just updating and learning how to use the point cloud with the current software. So if you already have CADZone, it's not going to be much of a learning curve. Unit training. Okay, so now you know how to use it. Now you've got to kick it back to your station and then keep up with it. Just like any piece of software or equipment, if you don't use it for a while, you're going to forget it. How many people do PowerPoint presentations here? Anybody? How many people can just sit down at the computer after not doing it for a while and go, yeah, I can do it? Not many. Okay, so the idea is this is even worse. We talk about collateral duties. I'm in the training unit. That's all I do is training and backgrounds and hiring. Hey, we're hiring, by the way, 6 cops. Everybody wants a job, we're hiring. I have to say that to come down here, by the way. That was one of my requirements. So if you're so I got this other things I've got to do. I don't have time to be sitting running the scanner all the time, but I do when I can. We get they have an officer involved shooting team up there that we run, that we are part of. If they have an officer involved, they're going to send. They want us to come for the scanner. Last call out we unfortunately were at the Faro conference in Florida. They called us and said, hey, we need you for the scanner. Oh, by the way, we're in Florida. I think we'll be back by 10 tomorrow if you'd like. So they end up bringing a total station from another agency to do it. So it's the best way to go as far as when you have to have a lot of data and you don't have time to come back. Because if you miss something, it's still on the scanner. So unit training. The total station and the 3D scanner, 2 different ball games. You only need one guy really to run this machine. We bring 2, just so that you have a different set of eyes to see if possible issues that pop up. So everyone has a role. You don't need a scribe anymore. Because if you got a scribe, he's writing a bunch because you're running 44 million points, right? So you don't need a scribe anymore. But you need someone to watch the machine. Usually the guy that's running it will watch it. You need some guy to kind of see where you're going with it, how you're going to run targets, how you're going to set them up. We do run targets, spheres, and checkerboards. You need to experiment with the scanner. You can't just get the training one day and go out and run a scene the next day. I mean, it can be done, but you don't want to do it that way because you're going to run into stuff that you didn't have anything aware of because the training didn't cover it or because you just can't recreate it in a training environment. So you got to go out there and run it. So you need to find your limitations. How far can you run a shot and still be able to register it with the software? Surfaces, not all surfaces can be scanned. Shiny black objects, not good. It makes cars look like they're like you can see through them because it's blank. Weather is going to be an issue also. Fog is not good on a 3D scanner. It needs to be able to see what it's hitting. Your settings, you can go from a 2-minute scan up to a 45-minute scan, depending on how much resolution you want, how far you want to reach with the scanner. And then equipment footprint. As it sits right now back there, it's about a 6-foot circle that it doesn't scan, it doesn't see it. So if you want to see that area, because you're in a cramped area like an apartment, you've got to go from another angle and hit it to see that area. Something to be aware of. You're not going to know that if you just take the training, because although it's covered kind of in the training, how many people have been training and get everything? You tend to forget. You can't remember the stuff that they send home to you, but not everything.
Does that footprint get bigger as the
Yes,
height of your scale?
it does. It does get bigger. So that's why we talked about put it on a big tall thing. Well, thing gets bigger. Now, if you're just trying to scan an intersection and you don't care what's below there, not a big deal. But if you're trying to get everything you can, because there's evidence everywhere, like on our first one, you got to scan from different angles. Okay, so back to continue. You're set up for scanning. Do you have enough targets? We started with 5 of those spheres. They're expensive spheres. For our big 36 wasn't enough. So we ended up learning how to move them as we went. But it's a learning curve. We also use checkerboards, which is just a target with a box, 4 boxes on it, white and square. You'll probably see it in some scenes here. And the different types. In the environment, the new software coming out will allow you to register by just using walls and items in the scene. It's not there yet. When you're trying to register scans, auto process, it's not there yet. So just be aware of that. And if you're just doing one station scan, yeah, not a big deal because you're not registering anything. It's just one scan. But if you're doing multiples, it's just something to think about. Where your scan positions are going to be. Unlike total station, you don't have to take do all the set down, the punching buttons to shut it down and moving it and then set it up on the back station. You don't have to worry about that. This is just pick it up, scan again. But what you have to do is know where that thing's going to scan so that you can get it. It's like a flashlight. If you can shine a flashlight in it and you can see it shines on it, great. But behind it in the shadows, it doesn't see. So you have to go for the backside and scan that way. Again, it's just practice with the machine. It doesn't take very long. You can run a scan in a minute or 2 minutes. So you can run a bunch of scans, pull up on a computer. Oh, okay, now I see what didn't work here. And just do that. So how many station moves are too many? There are never too many station moves. If you want to cover it, you want a good 3D point cloud, do as many as you want. Time is really the only thing that's stopping you. And how the things are changing as far as conditions go. On our scenes, our crime scenes are more, it's static. The only people walking through our crime scene are detectives. It's pretty much, we have it locked down, like car crashes. Then you got all kinds of things going on, and some people have state laws that say you have to have it open in so many times. We take our time. Up in the Northwest, we're pretty laid back. We take our time. We run the show. Station room stuff, you can practice it on paper. You can just draw a room and then and see where things should go so you can understand how your station move should be or where you should set up targets. How do you check your scans once you're in the field? You run your scan, and on our 36 one, again, this is our first one that we did was live, so we didn't want to screw it up because everyone was watching. So we get it, and we thought, well, how are we going to know that we got what we want? So he ended up running back to the station with all our first half of scans, running on the machine, making sure it's all set up, it's all registering, and then let me know, yeah, we're good. And while I was continuing the second half of the scene when I was doing the apartments. So it's real important that you have a way of doing that. One way you can do it is bring a laptop out. Scene LT, which is free, you can put a scene in there. You can't register them, but you can put it in there and see what you captured. Both visually because of the image file that it provides if you use the camera part of it, and by the point cloud you can look at it and see what shows up on there, especially if you're looking for certain items of evidence. If the weather is poor, what are you going to do? Technology, it doesn't like rain. And I don't know, is in Portland area, you guys don't have rain, right? It's all probably nice and sunny down here. It's just like the land of milk and honey, right? Is that what this is down here?
Just except for today.
Except for today, exactly. Because we came down, we brought it with us. This is what happened. So ideally, you don't want to run these machines in the rain. Ideally, okay? Have I heard that it's been done before? I have. But how long does it take for that thing goes to crap, right? And how much money do those things cost? And as he said, we were talking about, he said about replacing bodies. Yeah, cop quits. Okay, go hire another guy. Total station goes down. Holy crap, well, we're going to find a money to do that. I mean, you can see the difference in quality of, people over equipment, how much it takes to get things. So, you may have to put an umbrella over it or a tent, whatever you want to do. But I wouldn't run the thing in the rain. That's something you got to think about when you're running in the weather. You need to create a workflow process. And why this is important is because if you're a part-time user, as in you use it once a month or once every 2 months or once a scene happens, you're going to forget everything. So have some sort of printed out step-by-step process on how to use it. And if you don't, you're going to run into problems later. Just trust me on that. We're having the problems now with our guys.
I got a question.
Sure.
With the weather. Let's say you've got a big tent that's over it or whatever, just so you're protected from the rain. Have you shot some good scenes in the, some heavy rain?
Well, the way the total station works, okay, well, first of all, when you run in heavy rain, that laser is hitting those raindrops. So it's going to pop up on your point cloud. Okay, so you've got to be aware of that, okay? You can, if you run the scan, you don't have to worry about, scan the tent if you want to run the top, or you can limit your scan field so you don't get a tent at all. But you're going to have these poles. Now you could, if you want, you can move the poles as it goes around. You only do it once or twice, right? So it won't be a big deal. But understand, the rain is an issue no matter what when you're running. So hopefully it's not like just downpouring rain.
And to get to your question, we haven't actually had to use it in the rain yet. We've been very lucky on all of our call-outs. It's been dry. But we're already thinking ahead, what are we going to use? But that's one of the things that we're talking about. Are we going to use a canopy, or are we going to use a cover from our command post vehicle that folds out? We feel no matter what, as long as it's covered, it's not getting any direct rain on the mirror, because as you'll see that it has a spinning mirror, the water gets on the mirror, that messes up your scan data. So as long as you can protect that, you should be fine.
So, if your car's 15 feet in front of you or something like that, you may get some raindrops in the scan, but it's still going to hit the cars.
Yeah, you'll get what you want. You're just going to notice it in the point cloud. So you're going to have, so when it's just a bunch of, I don't know, just
like noise, right?
Noise, it's just noise in there, so you just have to understand it.
Pretty...
And you can move it, because you can move, it's 3D, you can move it around and find the point that you want to pick behind all that noise, because you're not like stuck by looking through all the noise to find your point. So you can move it around to find the point that you want. So you can still make it work. It's just one more thing you have to deal with. And if you've never dealt with it, you've never experimented with it, boy, we hate to have a big scene like ours. Then
We're getting ready to test the shit out of that.
It's a good idea.
One of the things that, like Curtis had talked about, when you're sitting on a computer and you're sitting there looking at stuff and you're not realizing what you got, the first time I ever came up with a mirror. I'm sitting here, I'm thinking I got two separate rooms, and the software is not registering them together. And I said about at least 3 hours calling him, cursing at him, going, what'd you guys do inside the apartment? You screwed up. Then I found out that all it was doing is the scanner was actually picking up the data in the reflection and portraying a second room. Once I finally figured that out and we cut it out, then everything worked fine and it looked great. But when you're spending 3 to 5 hours trying to figure out a simple problem like that, especially on one that is a very dynamic scene, you pull your hair out.
And he never did apologize.
Well, now's the time.
That was it.
He doesn't mean it.
Do it now in front of everybody.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, whatever. Okay, and then also, some people have it differently than we may have it. Sometimes you may be, if you're the person running the scan, you're the person who's going to run the drawing. Some people may have, yeah, we do the scanning, and then someone else back at the station that knows what they're doing runs the drawing. That may happen. However it works out. You have to document the scene so the person that's doing the drawing can go back and go, oh yeah, that's what that was, that one was. We go as far as doing drawings that have all the targets. Wherever the targets are, we have drawings, we number the targets and the spheres so that we can, when we do the alignment or the registration, if the auto registration doesn't work, we can just manually go, okay, that's A1, A2, A3, just poke and then do it in the registration software and it goes right up. So it's better, make sure you do the drawing. So that the person that's doing the drawing, Make sure you do the drawing, the hand drawing, for the guy that's doing the drawing, so he knows what's going on if you're not the same person. Importing into different software. When you get this, when you're done with Scene and seeing the program, and you want to move it into your third-party software, make sure you know how to do that. Because sometimes if you don't do it very often, or if you're using multiple software, because we use tons of software trying to figure out which is going to work for us. Make sure you write down how you do it so that you can, the next person that has to do it knows how to import it, because you have to do it in a certain code or a certain file type. So make sure you put that in your workflow process, and it needs to be all written down. And it is a live document because you're going to change it as you do things. Oh, that didn't work. So I'll mark it off on my workflow and change it to the new one, and everyone goes by the same workflow project or product. Okay, so department training. Okay, now you come off the Scene. You got this really cool, fancy machine that no one has ever seen before, and it costs lots of money. And they say, okay, scan it. And they're thinking of something like out of Star Trek where they're scanning the bridge of the Enterprise, you know, or if you've seen Prometheus where they're throwing the ball down and it's scanning these caves. Your crime scene decision makers, detectives, lieutenants, or whoever the staff is that's going to be running that crime scene needs to know what they're going to get into when you show up on scene. They want to know what you need to make it work. A lot of times, you could go in there, once the scene is secure, you can go in and start scanning until detectives get there, if you're given the notice. Do the markers have to be out? No, because we know we can see the evidence just as well as the person that's photographing, so we don't need the markers out there. But if the markers are out there, great, we'll wait till the markers are, and then we'll run through. We'll do part of the scene in the 36 scan scene. As I was getting through areas, I would say, okay, that area's done, go ahead and do what you got to do, collect your evidence or whatever you got to do. And as I move through the scene, again, this is a huge parking lot, 2 apartment buildings, 2 apartments within the 2 3-bedroom apartments within those apartments. So it's a huge scene. So as I went through scenes, I'd say, okay, I'm good here, go ahead and collect your evidence, whatever you got to do. So they should know what you're going to do and when you're going to use this thing. He was right. I was the guy that mouthed off, oh yeah, we can do this scene. We're not going to wait 2 hours for Washington State Patrol to come out and total station it. We can do this scene with no problem. Well, okay, I was wrong. Well, we did it. I mean, we pulled it off. But idea is you got to know what your limitations are. And unless you play with the machine and understand what you can and cannot do and experiment, you're not going to know that. And we just barely, we did it one time before we came out and used this machine. So it's real important that you do that. In some scene, we get called out to run this. This is not something that a patrolman can just grab and just run out and do it. We get called out to do this. So they're not going to have, not all scenes are going to be brought out. The only time that we go out for sure is officer-involved shooting. Obviously, liability cases against the city will be called out. Someone's dying or going to die or is dead, they're going to call us out. Is usually when we're involved. The crime scene participants, detectives that are going to be out there. Our first scene, again, no one knew what we were doing. They just, oh yeah, wait for the pole, we'll get out of the way of the pole, but we're just going to walk around. We had ghosts all over. There's people all over our point cloud. And it's unfortunate, but it's the reality because no one knew what's going on. So you need to let them know what to expect when you get there. When they see the machine, if the light's red, it's scanning. If you can't see the little screen, if you look on the scanner back there, there's a little screen you can see back there. If they can't see the little screen, they know it's pointing at them. That's the end all be all, because I can't, that's the easiest way to explain, because they can see that from a distance. So, we try to keep them out of the scene until we get done with that area. When do they want the markers at? Do they want us to scan first or after the markers? They need to make those decisions before we get out there. And then minimize the ghosts. Again, people walking through. Can someone walk through while you're scanning? Sure. It's not going to kill the scene. It's not going to kill your evidence. It's just something you got to deal with later. And it's better to show the court if they decide to do an actual visual 3D cloud of this scene. It's better to have it when nobody's in there, because you don't want to explain. And you really can't go into a court case. Yeah, we had 5 bodies there, and yeah, those are ghosts. Those are ghosts of those people right there that are walking through. You can't say that. So you want to try to keep it as clean as you can. Then your IT personnel. We talked about storage. Will your computer handle it? How much RAM you have? And then how are you going to store it and make it available to who needs it? If defense attorneys want that image or that data, how are you going to store it someplace that they can access it? Are you going to burn a DVD every time you do it? Well, we couldn't burn a DVD with our first one because it was too big. So we had to, we got to get a hard drive or something there. Yeah, bring us a big, huge hard, bring us a drive, a portable drive, and we'll dump it on there for you, whatever. We're not there yet. We're just going into inquest here in the next few months. So we'll know a lot more about that then. And then retention. How long do you have to save it with your state's laws? So Washington's 5 years, whatever for us. So you gotta store it someplace. And then the legal professionals, your prosecutor. Are they gonna let you walk into the courtroom with the point cloud and say, yeah, that's gonna work for us? They don't know what you're doing either. No one knows. As Bobby was saying, the defense people have not figured out this machine yet. They haven't figured out how to argue it out yet, or how to show it's bad. So because of that, you've got to do your homework so we don't look bad early on. Because once case law is made, everyone knows that in this part of the world, or the part of the states, once case law is made, we get screwed by it every time. So whoever goes in there needs to know what they're talking about when they're going to go to court. So if you are the first one that goes to court and explains this point cloud issue, know what you're talking about. Know who you can, know your resources. Have PPI get hold of someone from FAIR or whatever. They can come out and explain something if there's an issue. Don't try and explain it yourself, because they're going to find some way to screw you over on it. So don't do that. So everything you guys do is going to determine how we go from here with this machine. So be ready for it. What are you going to provide them to go to court with? Scene software has a thing called WebShare, which is kind of awesome. And the way it works is kind of like a web-based program where they can just go on the scene. It shows a map of the scene, and you can actually walk through the scene, kind of like on like Google Earth. You know how they do the walking through on the streets. It's set up the same way, so you can actually walk through the crime scene as the scanner saw it. And it works pretty good. And it's something that probably can give them, but they don't have to have a degree in how to use it. Because most people I've dealt with in the legal system, not very technical. They, like, yeah, it's a 32-bit version. What 32 what? What's that mean? They need to know that if they're going to start handing them stuff. So if you can hand them a DVD with like WebShare or something that's real basic, then they can walk through it themselves, plus your line drawing. And they talk about special training, how you're going to give us a defense. Will this become an evidentiary issue? Don't wait till the big case to decide this. Go talk to your prosecutor ahead of time. If you have to give them a quick display of how it works, that's awesome. And there's a guy named Eugene Liskio. If you go up online and search his name, he did a crime scene back in the East Side, and it was a cop that supposedly killed his family, is what the court case is about. And he goes in for the defense, actually. He's working for the defense. He does his laser scans, everything, after the fact. Laser scans everything, goes, no, you didn't do it. I can show you why. He takes trajectory from all his scans and shows it wasn't the guy. Well, 2 weeks ago, it was found that the guy's not guilty. Got him off. Now, I don't know what he did or not. That's not my decision, but it's cool that he can go later, take these scans, and figure out trajectory on the bullets to show that it wasn't shot from inside the car, it was from outside. So look up his name. He's pretty knowledgeable, and I've seen him talk, and he's like awesome to watch. A little more awesome than I am.
Yes.
Okay, so if we leave you with anything here today, is to ask for help. There's tons of help out there. You've got the internet, become a guru, or find someone that is a guru. The Faro website's got some data there you can go off of. YouTube has got tons of Faro stuff on there. You can go, and the Eugene guy, he puts all kinds of stuff up there. So the information's there. LinkedIn has some stuff you can go to. Remember, LinkedIn is not a really secure deal. So if you're talking about problems you're having with your scene, it's open up for anyone to see, so defense attorneys can see it also, so something to be aware of. We're hoping to get some sort of a Faro user group going so that it can be locked down to just cops or whoever, the forensics people that are actually using it, so that if you ask a dumb question, it's not going to come back in court later. If you find out something new, tell everyone else about it, because you may not be the first person to figure it out, but you may be saving a lot of people a lot of trouble, like us, going through these things. So, any questions? And there's no such thing as a dumb question, but we'll kind of look at you kind of funny if you do think it's kind of dumb. Any questions at all? So you guys got this all figured out? Yes?
Your 36 scans, what was your total time post-processing?
We're still processing. No, okay, so let's talk about that a bit, because it brings up an issue. Because remember, we just got the scanner. Our software, at the time, couldn't handle that much data. So you start bringing the scans in, 15, 16 scan, things shut down. Or it's slowed to a screeching halt, and we had to wait, non-responding, right? Those little things go on. So we're just waiting and waiting. So we had to break it down into smaller pieces to make it work. Meanwhile, we were getting all these different software upgrades that were causing grief for us. So it took us a long time. We were basically battling the software companies to figure out what we were doing. This isn't bad on the software companies. They did not expect that big of a scan. Never did. When you say, hey, how much can you get on your scanner, on your software? I don't know. What was that? What was the number? 1,500?
About 28 million points.
20 million points. We were in the billion number. So they weren't expecting it. So it's not a slam to the software companies. They just weren't ready. And we took it to the edge. We took it to the very edge. Now with all the RAM and stuff, that helped out. We could actually load all 36 scans into one time and actually look at it. Still bogs down a little bit. But it's important that you understand that when I say we're still dealing with it, it's because we just, the software hasn't gotten there yet. And it's not their fault. It's just, it's so new.
And you talk about the post processing, that was the diagram that they lost when we switched over. So
it's gone?
it was gone, and I'm just in the process of recreating it, and that our IT department lost it when they were converting from one smaller hard drive to one larger hard drive. So that's why it's still being processed, and we're still getting back to it.
Now the raw scans, we still had those. Those were
Yeah.
safe. It was just the process stuff. So first thing you do, you get back, burn your raw scans to a DVD. First thing, automatic. Don't even question it. Burn it to a DVD so that you have them in case something happens, and then work with everything else. Yeah.
How well does it pick up tire marks? And do they have to be dark tire marks? And does it pick up faint tire marks? And how does it work?
Ours has picked up tire marks in just about every scene. I don't know if you had any issues. We see it. You can see it in the scan, and you can see it in the photos. If you can see it there, you can identify it by points. So we don't have, and like Bobby said, some of the softwares, as you turn off the color, some of the scans become, or some of the skids become more pronounced. Are you seeing that?
Yeah, there's a view in the scene, it's called a planar view. You put these things in grayscale mode, you look in the planar view, and they just leap off the screen. You'll see stuff you didn't see at the scene.
Yeah, and if you're in doubt when you're at the scene, put down, we have these little tiny cones we bought. We just throw cones down at the start, the end of, because again, we have lots of time to play with ours. So we put them down and where we kind of see it at. So then if there's a problem, we know where the cones are. We know there should be something there. And they're not cones like with numbers on, they're just little cones to let us know that there's something there.
And what we're seeing is the skids go further out than where we marked. Like Bobby said, what you visually see and what's actually the scanner's picking up are sometimes two different things.
Yeah, it's amazing the stuff that this thing finds. And if you guys get a chance later on, we took an image from the one where we did the 45-minute scan, our second one, and you can look at this. But basically, how many people, when you go to you have a crime scene that you take maybe a fire truck or something with a ladder, and you go up over the scene with a photograph? Okay, well when we run the machine, it's still higher than that machine back there is. And when you see this looks like you're in a helicopter looking over it. That's how well because it puts it all together, and you just tilt it, and there you go. You see everything from above. So it saves a whole lot of time getting a fire truck, because those fire guys are kind of cranky.
The other question I had was, when you have stuff in your scene that you don't want, so say like some of Bobby's examples where there was patrol cars there and the attorneys say, I don't want those cars in there, can you take them out? Can you do that in
Okay.
your processing then?
Depends on your prosecutor. If your prosecutor wants it as it was seen, then you gotta leave it in. You can't take stuff out if the prosecutor wants it as it is. Now, if you're working on the defense side, yeah, sure, they probably don't want that stuff there. But as a law enforcement officers, we can't alter stuff. Is that the same here in Oregon?
Well,
What you got is what it is?
but you can cut it out.
Okay.
You can cut it out, and there's several different softwares where you can remove it. And like Curtis says, is you'll have your first product, which will be what you save. And as you're developing your presentation product, you can remove things out of it without deleting it. You just, in the visual effects of your diagram, take them out. Or if you're doing a 3D presentation with the point cloud, you can remove it in certain sectors, and you can group it and turn it off where it's not there, it's just not visible.
You just gotta be able to say that you've altered it some way. You can't just say this is what I saw. Because you.
Yeah, it's like layered or something. right?
Correct.
Yeah, exactly,
See,
layers
it's like,
or,
you know, the fire department or
cubes.
evidence eradication team.
Cropping
works on your
boxes.
evidence, and you're like, back the hell up. And then there's evidence underneath the truck. Your initial scan, you may not know that until later.
Right.
And then you get the fire truck off your evidence, then you maybe have to do a secondary scan. You're not, You got to be able to unlayer that.
Correct.
We, in our first, the big scene, we had a ME's van, beep, 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 right in the middle of it. And, you know, what can you do, right? So it's there. You can, you know, crop it out so that you're just making it visible. You don't remove it, you just make it invisible so it can't be seen. Makes it a lot easier for everybody. But just something that you can do though.
Also, one other thing is where Bobby talked on single point scanning. A lot of times you could do 2 single point scans, treat them as separate objects so they're not registered together, and generate your line work and your surfaces or whatever you want to, and then combine your line work
Yes.
into one scene. So you're not actually working with one registered point cloud. Instead, you're working with 2 sets of just drawings that you then merge and translate and rotate and bring those together using like CAD software. So different techniques. So they move and you move your targets. And right when you're packing up to go, you need to scan one more time. There's ways around that where you take Bobby's advice and just literally just scan again and bring that into the office and then work with it at that point. So there's ways around
Yeah,
that.
and there's no reason you can't go back and rescan item, you know, areas that you oh, we forgot to get this side. And you go back to rescan it and just manually put it in there, you know, make it register it that way. So it's not that big of a deal. And that's something you know, until the software, my opinion, until the software's there, it's not a good thing you should do, but you can still do it. It's not a game changer if you can't do it. You go back and talk about total station hybrid. You know, you're basically running total station, do the long shots, and then put it with this one so that you have the long shots. And because this scanner here is limited to how far it goes, right, 80 meters, whatever it is, you got to decide, okay, am I going to scan 7 minutes or 8 minutes, go later, scan again, 8 minutes later, go scan again. Faster than pulling out a toll station, I can tell you that. With my crew it is at least. So it comes down to how long a time you want to do it. You can move it by hand with this one, or you can bring the toll station out and however long that takes to put out. So just something to be aware of. But good machine. We went to the conference in Florida 2 weeks ago, saw the newest machine they got there. Awesome. New 330. Amazing what they can do. And they had a helicopter. They had this helicopter that they had mounted it onto. Not Faro didn't, but this guy's back in Switzerland or whatever. They're taking scans of what it was, a castle.
Muslim.
Castle, yeah. It's pretty cool. But anyways, they showed it there at the scene. Pretty cool. Any other questions that we can ask? And again, that's who we are. Feel free to ask. If you could take my number down, you know, you can call me, email me, whatever. I'll get back with you. If you have any questions about anything, we want to help you. We don't want you to go through what we went through. It was hell. Let me just tell you, it was hell.
And if it's 3 o'clock in the morning, call Bobby, please.
Yeah, call Bobby. If his girlfriend answers. Okay, well, we thank you for your time. Again, any questions, feel free to ask. We're not above any of the questions you're going to ask because we probably asked them ourselves. And I'd rather have you do it the right way than to do it wrong and then go, I should have done it this way. So, Steve, what hassle.
Thank you.